How's it going, guys? My name is Tim. I'm a photographer out here in the state of Washington, and in this video I'm gonna go over on how I would spend my 1 week in Washington state. So this itinerary is targeted towards anybody that's a photographer that loves to be outside. If you do van life, if you do overlanding or any sort of camping, this is the ideal itinerary for you. So to note, in this itinerary you're not going to be able to check out every single list that it is on this itinerary, but you will be in the area, and it is good to know what's around you when you do go there. The best time, in my opinion, to visit Washington is August to September. Around that time is when tourist season kind of starts to end. A lot of the trails and hikes and all that stuff are still open. The only thing you may have to account for is forest fires, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So this itinerary is also targeted towards people that are also on a budget as well. And this is going to be a very budget-friendly itinerary, depending on how you look at it. In my opinion, the best way to go about traveling through Washington State is to get a camper van. So the idea of this is that your car rental is going to cover all your accommodations as well, and it's all bundled in the same package. There's a ton of BLM land that you can camp in for free, or you can check out campsites. Most of them range from anywhere from $20 to roughly $35, maybe $40 at the highest. There's also rest stops as well, depending on which area you're in. Usually they're located along the highway, so you can always stay there as well. So once you get your car rental figured out, the first thing I would consider is stocking up on some food. Washington has a ton of fresh food that you can grab pretty much at every grocery store. They're also known for a lot of fresh fruits, such as like strawberries, apples is a really big one. There's quite a bit of farms here that you can grab fresh produce as well. So do keep that in mind if you do want to do that, or the standard Safeway from Myers. There's Costco's pretty much in every city here. So if you do want to try food at local restaurants, I will list a food recommendation below. This might actually be a separate video all in itself on restaurants to check out. I will list everything I have below it, just in case if you didn't want to cook your own meals, you can check out some restaurants within the area. Now that you have stocked up on food, you got your car rental, here's the start of the itinerary of what to do in Washington State. So we're going to start off this trip heading towards the North Cascades, and then we're going to work our way down to Mount Rainier National Park, to the Gifford Pinchot National Forest, and then back up into the Olympic National Park. So we're going to hit all three national parks in this list. Okay, so once you have made it to North Cascades National Park, the number one thing to do around North Cascades National Park is actually to go backpacking. And the second thing is Diablo Lake. So Diablo Lake is a viewpoint. There is no hiking required unless you actually do want to get to the bottom. If you were ever to Google North Cascades National Park, Diablo Lake is probably one of the pictures that will pop up. It's super infamous. That is one thing to go see, and it's just the parking lot that you go to. So you can check this off the list pretty quick. A great hike within the North Cascades National Park is a hike called Maple Pass. Great place for photos, especially during the fall. There's a lot of larches within the area. It's a great place for fall foliage, and you also get pretty amazing views of the mountain ranges in the area. A little down the road from Maple Pass is Blue Lake, and Blue Lake Trail is very similar to Maple Pass as far as scenery goes. If you're a photographer, Blue Lake is one of the more popular trails to take photos of, especially during the fall season. There's a lot of larches in the area to grab that as well. If you don't know what larches are, a quick Google search will tell you a lot more about them than probably I can. So another honorable mention hike to do within the North Cascades is called Cutthroat Pass. Another great hike as well if you wanted to check that out. Exiting North Cascades National Park, you're actually going to head back west and find camp. There are a ton of campsites around the area. There's actually, I think, 8 campsites at the very bottom of Diablo Lake that you can stay at. Next spot on the list is going to be Mount Baker. So there's a pretty great campsite around Mount Baker called Great Dew Lake. So if you do want to check that out and didn't want to find one on your own, that's a recommended campsite I would stay at. All right, so this is day 2, and you're gonna start off this day doing one of my favorite hikes in Washington State, and that is Park Butte Lookout. So Park Butte Lookout is about 7.6 miles round trip, and it's very much worth it. Sunrise or sunset will be an amazing time to go here, but just note as well that this isn't the only lookout hike that you'll be doing. About 2 hours north of Park Butte Lookout is going to be Nooksack Falls, and this is also another great place for photos. It's a short hike as well. If even that, it's more like a trail that you can walk on. It's literally right across the parking lot. So continuing for about 30 minutes, you're going to hit Pitcher Lake. And the name really says it all. This is another great spot that is not a hike. Depending on the time of year that you do go, just note that there's a lot of mosquitoes and a lot of bugs there. So bring some bug spray. Continuing up the road for about 10 minutes, you're gonna hit Artist Point. The hike you want to do here at Artist Point is called Huntoon Point. You'll get a 360 view of the entire mountain range. You'll also get a view of Mount Baker as well. But if you don't do Huntoon Point, Artist Point is also a great hike to do within the area. Depending on the time and how tired you are, you can very much sleep at Artist Point. A lot of people do astrophotographies here, and so they stay overnight to do that. Especially when it's Milky Way season, you can get a great shot of Mount Baker in the background with the Milky Way coming across it. So highly recommend it if you do that, and it's a great place to spend a night as well. This is day 3, and it's now time to get acclimated to civilization. So you'll be spending all of today within the city of Seattle. There are a number of things to do, and honestly, most people just book a trip to Seattle and just stay within the city. So there are a ton of things to do that you may not be able to do in one day. So places to check out within downtown Seattle, Kerry Park would be highly recommended. You get a view of the entire city as well as the Space Needle, and I think it's one of the most popular spots in downtown Seattle. Ella Bailey Park is a very similar park just as Kerry Park is. You get a great view. If you have a telephoto lens, this is a great place to take photos as well. Gaswork Parks also is another fun place to hang out. Pike Place Market, it's a tourist spot for a reason. There's a lot of things to do there. If you want to stock up on food or fresh produce and whatnot, Pike Place is the place to do it. There's a lot of great architectures within downtown Seattle as well. One of them being the museum, if you want to check that out. Columbia Tower, you can go to the very top. I believe last time I checked cost $20 to get to the very top, and you get an entire view of downtown. A great walk around the wheel, if not go on the Great Wheel. So if you do still want to be around nature, Snoqualmie Falls is about 40 minutes away from downtown Seattle, and it's arguably one of the better waterfalls that you can see that requires no hiking at all. Today would honestly be the day that you would just hang out around the city and do whatever you would want to do. But yeah, those are my recommendations, especially for photos and just hanging out and getting a great view of the entire city of Seattle. As for camping, seeing how you're within downtown Seattle, there's not going to be a whole lot of places that you can get to. There is a couple of rest stops that you can pretty much camp at, or you can get a hotel. The closer you get to Mount Rainier National Park, the closer you're able to find camp. That's actually where you're going to start day 4. So I would plan accordingly to start heading my way towards Mount Rainier National Park. Okay, so today is day 4, and you're going to be spending the whole day within Mount Rainier National Park. There are a couple things that you may want to know and a couple changes that the park has made. One of them being that starting May 24th through September 2nd, 2024, to enter Paradise or the Sunrise Corridors between 7 a.m. and 3 p.m., you're going to need a time reservation slot. It's very easy to get. You just go to the National Park Service site, go to Mount Rainier, and then schedule your time that you want to go. If you have never been to Mount Rainier National Park, there are a number of things to do and a number of things to see that you would not be able to do in one day. However, if you wanted to see the most of the park, this is how I would do it. I would go to Paradise, and Paradise is the place where most people would go to anyways. You get a lot of what Mount Rainier has to offer, starting off with a ton of waterfalls within the park. So you have Christine Falls, which is very, very cool if you want to take some photos there. It has a perfect composition with the bridge. Narada Falls is not very far away, and it's a very short hike from the parking lot. Skyline Trail is probably the most famous hike that you can do at Mount Rainier National Park. If you're planning on doing the entire trail, it is going to be pretty long and steep. There's a lot of places that you can stop within Skyline Trail, so it's definitely your option if you want to do the entire trail or not. Myrtle Falls is another great place and a great composition if you love photos. Comet Falls is quite a long hike. It is also very worth it as well. Silver Falls Loop is another great hike that you can do, and it is one of the shorter hikes. I mentioned a little earlier in the video that there's going to be a ton more of fire lookout hikes that you can do. Today would be the day to do some of those. I would recommend doing a hike called High Rock Lookout. It's the shortest out of all the hikes, and it's the best viewpoint that you can get. It's one of the shorter hikes that you can do with a great viewpoint at the very end. And so if you ever wanted to do sunrise or sunsets, this would be the hike to do it, just based off the duration of the hike. Tommy Peak Lookout is another great hike to do as well. Lake Summit Hike is another hike that you can do that's probably one of the more popular hikes. I don't believe Lake Summit is within the national park. You do get a great view of Mount Rainier. If you are not on Paradise, and the other side is Sunrise, and if you go through Sunrise, you can actually do Fremont Lookout. If you're anywhere around Mount Rainier National Park, there's a lot of dispersed camping that you can do here. And if you didn't want to do any of the dispersed camping, there's a lot of campsites as well. However, the next day that you're going to want to head to is a place called the Gifford Pinchot National Forest. and it's not too far away from Mount Rainier, but it is going down south. So it's recommended that you would want to find camp anywhere within the forest or within down south of Mount Rainier National Park. So here is day 5, and day 5 consists of mainly waterfalls. So if you love waterfalls, this is going to be the day for you. 2 hours down south of Mount Rainier National Park is going to be a hike called Cathedral Falls, and it's a fairly short hike. Depending on the time of year you go, the waterfall will be flowing quite a bit, and this is one of the hikes that you can walk behind a waterfall. 3 hours down south of Cathedral Falls is going to be Lower Lewis Falls, and Lower Lewis Falls is a campsite as well. So if you actually do end up finding camp, Lower Lewis Falls is a great place to stay at. Depending on, I guess, the water flow of it and how deep the water is at the time, you can very much swim at Lower Lewis Falls. Continuing down south within the forest, about 2 hours away, is going to be one of my favorite waterfall hikes in the state, and that is Falls Creek Falls. It's a pretty popular hike. Sky's the limit on the photos and footages that you can get here. It's a 3-tier waterfall, and like I said, it's a super popular hike. After Falls Creek Falls, not very far away, so about 30 minutes down, is going to be Panther Creek Falls. It's a very short hike to see this one, and arguably the best waterfall and hike length ratio. It's quite short from the parking area. This is also one of the waterfalls that sky's the limit on how many photos and compositions and whatnot that you can get here. So definitely worth the visit. If I were to do this day, I would do Lower Lewis Falls, Falls Creek, and then Panther Creek, just because it's so close. If you continue down south, you're actually going to be exiting the forest, and you're going to be getting very, very close to the Columbia River. And on the other side of the Columbia River is actually Oregon. This is up to you and your time to decide if you really want to do this or not, but you're going to be very, very close, and you're also going to pass Multnomah Falls, and it's the tallest waterfall in Oregon and one of the most photographed waterfalls, I think, honestly, within the United States. So you can go across there and then go check out Multnomah Falls at the very end. It actually might be a great place to do that for sunset. So after this, you'll want to be heading towards Olympic National Park. A number of places that you can camp along the way. If I were to recommend a way to do this, I would honestly camp out at one of the rest stops along I-5 highway. So you're going to be passing maybe 4 or 5 rest stops there. If you want to beeline straight towards anywhere near Olympic National Park, there is a couple campsites that you can stay for free. Some dispersed camping as well along that, but it is going to be quite a bit of a drive. So I would just stay at one of the rest stops. So now you made it out of day 6 out of this whole entire itinerary. And before you get to the Olympics, there are some notable spots and honorable mentions that you should check out before you get there. One of them is being High Steel Bridge. It's a worthy detour. If you have a drone or anything, it's a great place to fly around and get a lot of footages there. Rocky Brook Falls is going to be along the way. It's nearly across the parking lot that you can go to. I've also seen people swim there, so if you wanted to go for a swim, you can do that. Once you get to the Olympic National Parks, the number one thing to do and the number one hike to do there is a hike called Mount Storm King. It overlooks Crescent Lake, and it's one of the more Instagrammable photo spots that you can find. You also get a waterfall hike out of this, so Rainier Falls is at the very bottom if you choose to do that as well. Honestly, most people go to the Olympic National Parks to visit the rainforest, and it's what it's known for. So the whole rainforest as well is going to be something you want to check out. On the way there, you're going to pass by a city called Forks, notorious for the Twilight films being based out of it. There's a lot of things that you can do within Forks, so if you love Twilight, check out Forks. So out of this whole entire itinerary, this is the day that you also get to visit the coastline. And there's a number of things to do along the coastline. I think my most recommended place to visit is Ruby Beach. There's also Rydell Beach as well. It's also famous for the hole-in-the-wall rock sea stacks over there. A little further down the road, you'll actually find a place called the Tree of Life, and it's probably best to visit this before the tree falls for obvious reasons. So I would highly recommend that and seeing it before it goes. There's quite a few places to camp around the Olympic National Park. There is a really unique Airbnb out about 15 minutes outside of Forks that is Twilight themed. So like I said earlier, if you love Twilight, this would be a place for you. So after that, it is now time to make your way back into Seattle. The good news about this is that there are a number of ways to get back into downtown Seattle. And what I would recommend, just based off all the driving that you have done, is to take a ferry across the water. It's probably going to save you quite a bit of time of driving around. And you also get a ferry ride out of it, so count that as part of the trip as well. And that is how I would spend my 1 week in Washington State. Okay, so let's talk about budget. If you were gonna go through a company called Outdoorsy, which is pretty much an Airbnb for camper vans, and these camper vans are built out so you can live in, on average you'll be spending around $1,960, and that will include all the insurance and unlimited miles. If you go through a little cheaper option and through a company called Escape Campers, it will be roughly on average $1,230, and that includes the insurance, but you are limited to 100 miles a day and an additional 30 cents per each mile, which isn't bad considering an extra 300 miles will cost you another $90 or so. 1,200 plus 90 bucks is 1,300 in comparison to 1,960 or so. The ferry ride is going to cost you roughly $22 to get back to Seattle. Gas is at today's price $4.50, so and you'll be driving around 850 miles at minimal, so you'll be spending roughly $200 on gas. So it's hard to budget money on foods because that really depends on you and how much you buy and how much you want to bring during out your trip. But yeah, I would budget anywhere between $100 and $150 on groceries. A national park pass is going to be $80 per year annually, but if you don't buy the pass or you already have a pass, you can actually skip this part. But if you want it per visit, it's $30, and this lasts up to 7 days. So realistically, you only have to buy one pass. So when it comes to camping, it really depends on you and if you do any dispersed camping. If you do not and you do end up staying at a paid campsite throughout the entire trip, I would budget anywhere between $25 to $30 per day. Total for 1 whole week, it would cost around $1,715 at minimal. So like I mentioned before, you're not going to visit every single thing on the list, but you are going to get very close to some of the spots on the list. The cool thing about the itinerary is that you get to choose on where you decide to go or what hike you can do within the area, especially if you wanted to visit all 3 national parks that Washington State has to offer, which is the Cascades, Mount Rainier, and then the Olympics. There's a lot to do within the state, and if you're anything like me, when I go and visit another place, I want to see everything I can possible and make my trip worth it, or at the very least attempt to visit every single thing possible. And the best way to get a hold of me is probably through Instagram, and I'll link that below. If you have any questions about the itinerary or what to do in certain areas, feel free to reach out. I'll see where I can help out. But yeah, that'll wrap up the entire video. All right, take care, guys.